Look, I'm still trying to figure this out 10 years later, but I think that for there's a slightly different thing for consumer and enterprise. So I think what I've learned is that enterprise is very much about co-creation with your customers. Consumer tends to be more data-driven, analytical, and about speed to production.
Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 304, and today's guest is Brett Martin, co-founder of Kumospace and general partner at Charge Ventures. Kumospace is a venture-backed virtual office space platform that provides immersive and interactive virtual spaces for hosting team meetings and social gatherings. Charge Ventures is a venture capital firm based in New York that invests in pre-seed and seed early-stage tech ventures. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like the details on Brett's advice around raising capital, which is a process that he calls FOMO Fundraising, Brett's background story, which includes a variety of pursuits across investment banking, sailing, Vice Media, starting a band, being a Fulbright Scholar, and how he ultimately ended up in the tech industry as an investor, the story of Sonar Media, the first ambient social networking company, and lots of lessons learned from building this company, all the details about Kumospace and how their platform is solving the challenges of remote work, collaboration, and culture, Brett's experience as an investor with Charge Ventures, plus the details on what they are targeting for investments, the difference between figuring out product market fit for enterprise versus consumer products, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. Did you hear that VentureFizz launched a spin-off site a few months ago called Just Product Management Jobs? The title of the website says it all, so if you are a product manager and you're looking for your next opportunity, check out justproductmanagementjobs.com and you'll find over 100 PM-specific jobs at all levels of experience. Oh, and if you're hiring product managers, make sure you add your jobs there. A listing is only $199, which is such a deal for such a highly curated audience. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Brett. Brett, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, absolute pleasure to be here, Keith. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you because we got so much to cover. You're a serial entrepreneur, you're an investor, so there's a ton to talk about. But one of the things I do want to kind of start talking about, and it's definitely a very, it's always a thing that entrepreneurs are thinking about, is raising the next round of capital. But obviously with the market the way it is right now, it's a little bit challenging. So you recently posted some, like a process called FOMO Fundraising on LinkedIn that I thought it'd be great to break that down for any entrepreneurs that are out there and, trying to get investors to really lean in and hopefully, take that next step with a term sheet and an investment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, the best thing you can do for your fundraising is to build a really quality business with lots of revenue and high profits and a great management team. I mean, that's going to make any sort of fundraising easy. But that said, even if you have a good business, you can screw up fundraising. And I call it FOMO fundraising. It's sort of a joke, but the idea is that investors sadly are a lot of pack animals, and they care a lot about social signal. And if you're an investor, you make a bad deal, that's okay. You can only lose one time your money, but if you miss a good one, you might miss 50x your money, right? So the worst thing for an investor is missing out on a really good deal. And so that you have to show people that they are missing out on a really good deal if they're not investing in you. And so FOMO fundraising is, in short, it's really it's a three-step process, which is when you first meet people, first impression, you get a warm intro, you essentially tell them who you are and what you're doing and kind of what your vision is, right? And then your second meeting, you have your update and you show the investor that you did what you said you were going to do. So that you've now given them two you've connected two dots, right? But you need three to make a trend. But the secret is that on the third interaction, and this is right before you're actually getting ready to ask for money. Note that you haven't asked for any money yet. On your third interaction, you actually you manufacture it's some catalyst. So whether that could be, leaking something to them via back channel, via, one of their other portfolio companies, or you create some press that that they're going to see, or happen to be in town, this week to catch up for coffee, or you bump into them at a conference conveniently, right? But like, you make it so that they hear about how great you're doing, and how that's why press release is great. Oh, we just signed this huge customer, right? And then they, in their head, they now have 3 dots, which is a trend, which and they see that you did what you said you're going to do, and that things are taking off without them. And then they, at this point, reach out to you and say, "Oh, let's have can we have a talk? I'd love to talk to you about investing in your company," which is obviously a much stronger position from which to start a negotiation if someone is coming, to you and asking for the meeting rather than you begging them for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process, and it's like sales, right? It's like dating. It's, you're going to be in this relationship for hopefully a very long time. So make sure you choose carefully, but it is a process that hopefully you get people excited and want to take that next step in making that investment.
Yeah, and the other sort of, I think, just fundraising tip that I beat everyone over the head with is that it's not about convincing skeptics, it's about finding believers. And so, I think I see a lot of early entrepreneurs, they'll try to overwhelm you with information or rebuttals, or if someone has said they're not interested, they don't want to invest, the best thing you can do for everyone is just to move on quickly and actually find that person that believes. And oftentimes it's finding investors. People love to feel validated by what they see, and so you actually want to find the investor that had the same idea as you, or a similar idea. And when you find that person, they're already looking for you, right? So, and you'll feel the difference. When you find an investor that's looking for what you're building, you're gonna have instant connection. You're not gonna have to convince them of anything other than that you're the person to bring this thing over the finish line.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, so let's rewind the clock. So where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child? Were you always entrepreneurial?
Yeah. I'm from we were just talking about I'm from Ocean City, Maryland, which is a small mid-Atlantic beach resort town. And it was, I think all the people who own, all the locals, it's a small town, there's only 7,000 people, but 500,000 people kind of in and out every week. And so all the locals actually are small business owners. They own anything from hotels to restaurants to to beach stands to parasailing stands. And so I think entrepreneurism is very much like in the DNA of the people that live there. My dad was always kind of doing his own things. And I sold seashells in the seashore till I was 8 or 9. That was my first foray into own business.
All right, so how did you get your career started?
From Ocean City, Maryland, down by the beach. I went to Dartmouth, studied economics and psychology, and then right out, didn't really know what I was going to do, but went down to New York and joined an investment bank called Thomas Weisel Partners, actually a San Francisco-based bank full of entrepreneurs. They're funding all the entrepreneurs during the dot-com bust. That was really my only 2 years working an actual job. I've been either building or investing the rest of my career. And so I went and lived on a sailboat for a year, sailed 6,000 miles, saw some pirates and waterspouts, came back from that, started a band, launched Vice Media in New York City, moved from there, did a Fulbright scholarship in Milan, where I met Thanos Papadimitriou, who's my Fulbright advisor, who would later become my partner at Charge Ventures. And then I used the Fulbright to kind of pivot into entrepreneurship. I interviewed on Skype at the time, 100 VCs and entrepreneur founders of publicly traded companies. And that was kind of my pivot into tech. And so shortly thereafter, I came back, had a lost year, and then moved down to Austin with, my smartest buddy from college, and had a failed coding experiment, I will call it, but that basically got me in the game. Came from there, moved back to New York, and joined a small venture capital fund called App Fund. That was at that time the iPad had just been announced, and it was focused on investing in tablet-based technologies. And so that was how I got my start. And basically, while I was at App Fund, they decided, well, we really want to incubate companies. And so I said, okay, well, that's good because I was going to leave and quit and start my company anyway. I might as well do it here. And so that's actually how I got started with Sonar.
It's so Sonar Media, like, so let's talk in detail about that, because that had some legs. Like, I watched your pitch at TechCrunch Disrupt New York in front of just a great panel of judges. I was like impressed, the feedback that you're getting for the idea, and obviously had some legs after.
Entrepreneurship is a form of self-expression, and so entrepreneurship is bringing, trying to bring something about yourself into the world and try to, kind of make the world in your vision. And so I think Sonar for me was about, how do you make the world your home? How do you make yourself feel comfortable around and connected to the people around you wherever you are? And so the idea was to leverage, the iPhone and proximity and all the existing social networks and bring that data down into your pocket and show you how you're connected to people around you in a way that made you feel like you could just start a conversation with anyone near you, which I think, again, was a reflection of like kind of where I grew up, in a small town that had lots of tourists. So we were always kind of like, felt very close, but also felt like, you could connect with strangers. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, it was probably at least 10, 6, 7, 10, maybe 30 years too early. But, I think it was a great lesson. We had a hot moment. We had billions of users, and back then, few million users is like 50, 100 million users now, right? The internet was literally a tenth as big. And so, I learned a lot. I mean, learned a lot about partnerships, learned about customer acquisition, learned a lot about why people, what's a good reason to do a startup, what's not. I think I jokingly say that the postmortem I wrote got as much traction as the startup did. It's not actually true, but it made the rounds and felt like it wasn't a complete waste.
Well, I can see why, because I read through it and it was just, man, you just read through it and you put it all out there. I mean, you read it and you had so much empathy of what you went through, yet as an entrepreneur, you can relate to a lot of it too, right? Because you talk about, listening to your users, false positives, listening to your users, false negatives, right? So there's just so much that you learn from that experience that you shared, which I think, that's hard for entrepreneurs to do.
Well, if you're not, I mean, the thing is, in entrepreneurship, you make a lot of mistakes. So if you're not learning from your mistakes, you're in trouble, or you're missing a great opportunity, at least. So I think the least you could do, as an entrepreneur, if something's not work, is take the time to write down what you learned and share it with everyone else.
Well, listening to your user was definitely something that I could see that being a big piece that entrepreneurs can relate to. But the other one that I thought was really interesting was identify your top 3 priorities, throw away number 2 and 3. So just focus on number 1.
Yeah, I mean, they say, Steve Jobs, they credit him with saying focus is saying no to 1,000 good ideas. And it's hard. You have limited resources. You only get a few shots on goal, and so you got to really make each one count. And as someone with a lot of interest, as you've pulled out of me already, that is challenging. And that's a part why I work with my co-founder at Kumospace, Yang Mao. We've worked on 3 companies together, and he's my better half when it comes to focus, for sure. He's an engineer. He is, loves simplicity, and it kind of lets me be freeform and generative, and he can slim it down and turn it into reality, which is always just great having a better half like that.
All right, well, that's a perfect segue. So let's talk about one of the things you're up to these days. So Kumospace, what is Kumospace all about?
Yeah, I mean, Kumospace is a virtual office for remote and hybrid teams to basically show up and work out together every day. So if your team is distributed in a bunch of different offices, or you have some people in the office today and some others from working from home, as most hybrid teams experience, you need one place where everyone can kind of show up and see who's around and see who's available, and tap someone on the shoulder and get a quick answer, and have kind of those spontaneous interactions that, create company culture. And, with everyone in different places, the easiest way to do that is online. And so, Kumospace is a virtual place for teams to have all of those interactions. And yeah, Yang and I started that during the pandemic, and it's been a really fun ride ever since.
Yeah. So what are you seeing in terms of the trends? Like, is this still a, companies, there's remote first companies, then there's, companies that are like hybrid, then there's some companies that are like, we're going to be in person again. And this is just the trend and what's going to happen. So like, there's a big market. Obviously there's lots of companies out there that are thinking in different ways. So what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think remote work was a growing trend before the pandemic. It's still a growing trend after the pandemic. It kind of had a temporary, I'd say, peak, like a lot of things did during the pandemic. It's since settled back down, but it's actually kind of stable, and now growing again. Right? I actually just saw some research that you're going to hire faster, and you can hire remote people. I saw some other research today that said. If you look at the time split on a typical weekday, if you're fully in person or fully remote, you spend about 76, 77% of your time doing IC work. But if you're hybrid, you spend less than 50% of your time doing IC individual contributor work. And you spend more than 50% of your time in meetings. And so, I think it's funny. Everyone said we were more productive when we were working remote, which I think is true. Now that said, I think there's obviously some problems with everyone working in silos and working by themselves and not being connected. And that's a lot of the reasons why we built a virtual office. I think it was an easier choice for a lot of people to just drag people back to the office and learn better management practices. But I think long term, we'll probably settle in some sort of hybrid configuration because there is value in face-to-face interactions. But I think it's kind of a flipped model, right? Sort of like the flipped classroom. Before it used to be lecture all day, homework all night. Now you watch lectures at night and then you do work in class where the teacher can help you work through specific problems. I tend to think of the office that way. It used to be work, in your office all day by yourself and then maybe have a happy hour afterward. Now I think it's like, hey, you do your IC work at home, right? And then you come into the office for special meetings. Office is the new on-site is the new off-site. And or in our case in Kumospace, we have 2 big offsites a year where we get the whole team together.
So is this like, I see a key issue out there just, with VentureFizz, we're helping companies with hiring and employment branding. And a lot of feedback I hear is, companies that are hybrid or, because remote anywhere is definitely, that's an obvious problem, but it's the hybrid companies where you have some people in the office, some people not. So what are we missing when I'm in the office? Like, does this help solve that of the times you're not in the office, you're still feeling connected through the platform?
Yeah, so we call that remote worker equity, right? Is this idea that historically being a remote worker when everyone else was in the office was like being a second class citizen, right? You weren't getting the plum jobs, you weren't getting promoted, you weren't getting mentorship, you weren't getting FaceTime with your boss, right? And it that disproportionately affects disadvantaged groups. It affects women, it affects mothers, it affects fathers, it affects people of color. And so remote work was this really amazing equalizer where all of a sudden everyone was on the same plane. Now that we go back to hybrid, we actually have the same problem, but it's exacerbated, right? Because you have even more people that are not in the office at any given time. And so one of the big things we think a virtual office facilitates is equity for remote workers, giving them that mentorship, giving them that exposure. We think of FaceTime always as this negative thing. It's like, oh, my boss is making me show up. But there's good FaceTime too, right? There's like, oh, I'm getting the looks, I'm getting the mentorship, I'm getting, the quality time with my peers and my bosses and my mentors that it's going to help me grow. And everyone who's run remote or distributed team talks about how hard it is with young people, right, to give them the proper training, and that's in part the young person needs it, but it's in part the boss being available, right? And so when you're like a boss and you're just on Zoom all day, and you're in calls and you're not available, then that doesn't really, it's not fair to your younger workers. And so Kumospace and virtual offices generally, it's just a way of solving that problem, just making yourself available for your team. Like actually right now when I'm in Zoom, I'm like hyper cognizant that I'm not in the office with my team.
All right. So how does it work? Because I mean, you go to your website, there's a great, demo, but for the people listening, how does Kumospace work?
So it's really simple. It's a tool that you turn on in the morning and you turn off at night when you leave. So it's just like an office. Our team starts trickling in, opening up Kumospace between 9 and 10 a.m. It's it's a basically two-dimensional view of your office. We've got offices, we've got conference rooms, we've got kind of game areas with games. You can close the door and have a private meeting. You can only hear the people near you. You can't hear people across the office, but you could just with a couple taps go over and tap them on the shoulder and get an answer. If you see that someone's having a presentation, but they're doing it out in the open, with the open door, you can see their presentation, right? And so, your office feels alive. Like one of the easiest ways of selling Kumospace is to get people into our office because their eyes light up and they say, "Oh, wow, like I can see your whole team. I can see things are going on. I get that buzz. I get that feeling that work is being done, that I'm not alone sitting at my computer, in my case, in a hotel room right now, right? Like I feel the other 20, 25 people there working for a common purpose. And that's pretty motivating.
So you announced your Series A last year, 21 million, led by Lightspeed. So what's the current state of the company, like number of employees or whatever, information you could share?
Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky at Kumospace to just have an amazing group of investors. We raised our seed from Ed and Elliot at Bold Start, longtime friends of mine. Some of the best infrastructure investors in New York City. True founder believers, and then we have this opportunity to work with Paul Murphy at Lightspeed. Paul's another old OG New York tech guy. Built Dots. He's an entrepreneur as well. And so, we wanted to work with entrepreneurs. And yeah, it's just given us amazing, flexibility to really build out. I mean, this is software that people are spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day in. And so you can imagine, there's a lot of demands on that software. And so, we're fortunate to have the capital to build something really great. And, just been building out features. And now, over the past year, really going to market and, signing up, 100 customers a month at this point, bringing their whole teams on, bringing on big clients, like NASA and Google, government of Canada, a bunch of big contact center folks. Yeah, just feeling really, a bunch of the big four consultancies, are working with us, KPMG, and so it's just you have a vision and it just takes years to get there, but I feel like every day that it gets better, gets to be a better experience, our team learns, and yeah, we're just trying to turn that vision into reality. The core of the vision is that we don't have to choose between in person and doing quality work, but not having a quality life, having too much commute, not getting to see your kids, or remote but being isolated and not having connection and not being able to build something valuable. At Kumospace, we just think there's a third way where you can get great work done, really collaborate, really understand and connect with your teammates, and live the life you want. And whether that's traveling all over the world or just spending more time with your kids. That's the vision we have. And I think if the world, if it's just we're using Zoom and Slack 20 years from now, it's just a sad place. I don't want to live there.
All right. So in addition to Kumospace, you also are a co-founder in a pre-seed seed fund in New York City called Charge. So how did that come to fruition? Because this was about maybe 8, 9 years ago.
Yeah. So before Kumospace, I was just happily investing out of Charge. Charge is Charge Ventures. It's New York City focused premium pre-seed venture capital. So, we invest anywhere from $250 to $1 million in companies just getting off the ground. Two brilliant gals in a downtown apartment is our dream founding team. And yeah, I had just been building that with my partner Chris Sabachi and Thanos Papadimitriou. Thanos was my Fulbright advisor from a decade prior, and we just felt like everyone talks about the glutton seed, capital. Oh, there's so many seed investors, but if you actually go ask any first-time entrepreneur how do they find their lead for their first round of capital, let me tell you, they're not going to tell you there's too many seed investors because there's, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're not going to say that at all. There's a shortage. Like,
they're not going to say that, right? Because yeah, it's really easy to find a lot of people willing to kick in another 200K into a round being led by Sequoia or First Round Capital or
right.
Union Square Ventures. Yeah, no shortage of people that want to tag along with a fancy brand name. But if you want someone who's going to plunk down and give you your first 500K and lead your first $1 million round and give you your first capital to get off the ground, there's not a lot of people who wanted to do that. And so I think that's where we try to differentiate. We of course fund a lot of repeat founders and, people I've known for, 10, 20 years. But I think where we really differentiate ourselves is by focusing on first-time founders who have shown the grit and the resilience necessary to get the ball moving. These people are building businesses, they've got products, they're in market, they're making revenue, and they've figured out a way of doing it without being part of the, good old white boys club. And we love to put down and get behind folks like that. So if anyone's building a software company in New York, but really anywhere in America, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and it's a pretty extensive portfolio. You've been around for a while now. So there's a lot of companies in there where you definitely recognize the company names, and you've had some exits in there. So what's the best way to get on your radar as far as like a first meeting?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email, brett@charge.vc, and mention VentureFizz, and I'll definitely put that in the subject line, and I will definitely get back to you.
Okay, so once someone does land that first meeting, like what are you trying to get out of that first meeting with an entrepreneur?
I mean, fundamentally, I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to help. So, if I can steer them the slightest bit more towards success, I think that's a successful meeting for me. I love, it's funny, everyone talks about building $1 billion company, but it's surprisingly how few entrepreneurs actually believe that they're going to do it. At the end of the day,
So
actually
rare.
believing that you're going to build $1 billion company is kind of an insane thing, right? And most people aren't insane, to their credit, but there are a few kind of crazy ones out there. And when you meet someone like that, you're always trying to figure out, is this person a fraud or a genius? And sometimes the line is blurry, as we've seen we've seen in some recent things. But I think it's really exciting to partner with people who are so passionate about what they're doing. And for a pre-seed fund like ours, it's all about founder market fit, right? It's like, why do you have some unique story? It doesn't, oftentimes it is deep domain expertise gained from professional experience, but it also could be just some deep personal connection. Someone in your family had cancer and you're out to cure it, or you had just a terrible time, renting a car or selling your house, right? And then you want to make it a little better, right? So some deep personal connection which has given you a unique insight to a problem that you are uniquely positioned to solve. And finding people like that and getting to spend time with them, it's honestly just an honor.
You brought up a good point that I think there's been a lot of hard lessons learned from entrepreneurs around valuation, right? Like, a couple of years ago, these lofty valuations are really starting to hurt entrepreneurs if they're going to raise more capital, and you want to keep that like valuation progressing as a higher level, yet you have to do a down round or something like that. So what's your advice when it comes to that valuation conversation with entrepreneurs?
I mean, look, I sit on both sides of the table. So I completely understand with entrepreneurs that are, you know, trying to hold on to as much of their company as possible, right? That's their job. I think what you're ultimately doing is trying to hold on to as much of that company as possible times the outcome, right? Your expected value is, your ownership times the outcome times the probability of it happening, right? So you got to keep in mind not just your ownership, but rather the likelihood of success and the size of that outcome, right? That's your kind of expected value, personal value equation. And sometimes it might be worth having a certain investor. Like I see this all the time. The best investors can sometimes they don't have to pay the highest valuation, and that is because entrepreneurs realize that having Sequoia or first round actually improves your likelihood of success and the potential size of your outcome, right? And so it's better to have a smaller piece of that pie. So I think it tends to be a more junior entrepreneur that is too fixated on that. I'm not saying that it's very senior entrepreneurs are also protective of their equity, but I think not to the detriment of their success, which I think you sometimes see. So I think minimize dilution, get as much money as possible, but set yourself up in a way where you can, keep steadily progressing and growing, and you don't have to, take the pain of it down around.
All right. So in addition to everything we've talked about, you're an adjunct professor at Columbia. So what coursework are you teaching there?
Yeah, well, I am again very fortunate to work with my co-instructor Daniel Guetta, who's the head of the Data Analytics Institute at Columbia Business School, and we teach a course together called Analytics in Action, which is basically a master course in applied machine learning, where we work with a bunch of companies. We work with gigantic companies, Citigroup, Moody's, L'Oreal, Zipcar, down to fast growing startups, and we basically run full-fledged data science projects for them with the teams of half MBAs, half engineers. And yeah, it's a great experience. Get to really learn a lot about machine learning and applied data science, and our companies get a bunch of great work done, and our students get a lot of great experience and a lot of job offers every year. So it tends to be a kind of win-win-win. And again, if anyone's interested in has a company that needs help with their data and has a problem that needs to be solved, we got a team for you. So also feel free to reach out.
All right. So earlier on in that previous company that we talked about, Sonar. So I talked about your postmortem you talked about false positives and false negatives. So how do you avoid those? Like how do you use customer interviews for finding that right product market fit? Because you will talk to people and they'll tell you they like this feature and I'll pay for this and all these things, yet you could go run and build it and not find that right strike zone.
Look, I'm still trying to figure this out 10 years later, but I think that for there's a slightly different thing for consumer and enterprise. So I think what I've learned is that enterprise is very much about co-creation with your customers, and you're co-creating, you're building what trying to figure out what they want and trying to put product to their words, but you're selling it as you build it. So you're generally building ahead of the selling. It's like, if we build this, you will buy it. Yes, okay, we'll build. Whereas consumer tends to be more data driven, analytical, and about speed to production. So you just iterate and build as many things as possible and put them in front of people, and if people use them, that's great. And if they don't, then it's not working, rather than asking literally, because consumer experience tends to be, if I wanted to get there faster, they would ask for a faster horse, right? Like so yeah, that's sort of my nuance I've learned in the past few years. I think consumer is just about speed to market and iteration and data, and then for enterprise it's about thoughtfully designing and with your customers.
All right, with a blog post, you wrote something very interesting. It said, startups don't die when they run out of money. They die when their founders let go. So it can be hard being an entrepreneur to finally come to that point of conceding and letting the company go, but you've put so much blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it's really hard and emotional, and we could just run up this hill again. So at what point do you think it makes sense for that entrepreneur just to finally say, okay, it's time to move on to the next idea or do something else?
I mean, that's such an intensely personal question that I think it depends on the individual, but it might not serve you to keep chasing the same idea, in the sense that, you might have better ideas if you were giving yourself the space to let them come. You might learn something on a job that will help you start your next idea. You might be able to start your next idea better if you have some capital in the bank that came from a few years of working and building a personal balance sheet. So I think that people do things that are, quote unquote, aren't right for them or good for them all the time, and sometimes they know it and they choose to do it anyway. So I would never begrudge a founder who was still pushing, as long as they were doing it in an honest way. I mean, I think sometimes people are just hanging around because they're afraid and they don't want to know what to do next, which I think is not a fair, that's not living up to your fiduciary duty. But as long as, you're making an honest fight and, acting rationally, then, as a investor, I would never begrudge you. I want you to fight to the end.
All right, 3 apps you can't live without.
3 apps I can't live without. Well, I mean, not to be, banal, but I mean, it's probably Spotify, Google Maps, and I'll try to think of one that, well, I don't know, Shazam, probably, just because, again, I'm really into music. So if anyone has better ones, I'm open.
Yeah, no, Shazam, I still open that thing up periodically. It's great. I mean, it's amazing. Okay, well, what about a good podcast or book recommendation for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think my go-to book recommendation is it's called Endurance, and it's the Shackleton story of failed voyage to the South Pole, across the South Pole, and it is my, in case of emergency, break glass and read book to keep fighting book. So for any entrepreneur that's kind of in the pit right now, I would recommend taking a read through that book. You'll stop feeling sorry for yourself real fast.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard. I haven't read the book yet. I have to put it on my short list because I've definitely heard amazing things about it. So, okay, outside of work, what else do you like to do for fun?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I rediscovered surfing over the pandemic, and I'm definitely, not forgetting about it again. It's I don't know, my favorite thing to do on the side.
So cool. Well, Brett, thanks so much for taking the time to walk us through your background, story, and journey, and all the great work you're doing at Kumospace, and of course at Charge Ventures as well.
Keith, thank you so much. That was such a lovely conversation and so well thought out. And I am honored to be a guest. Thank you.